Hello and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley,
the podcast where three priests link our stories with those of a Reverend Geraldine Granger and other TV vicars. I'm Kate.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Ruthi. This episode we're reflecting on Remembrance Day, talking about our own experience of it, particularly for me with my dad. And then we'll be talking a bit about TV, where we've seen vicars who are part of that. And Kate is going to pitch to us a Vicar of Dibley Remembrance Sunday episode.
Well, hello everyone.
Hello. We're with the Reverend Jenny Blair.
Way! Oh yeah,
This is
first
our
time recording,
First
isn't it?
recording, isn't it, since you've got married?
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a bit weird because we batch recorded a whole load of episodes to give Jenny time to focus on her wedding and her honeymoon. So we haven't actually recorded in, is it 2 months?
It's something mad like that.
Oh my
yeah.
goodness. Yeah.
I've forgotten what you look like.
Oh. Well, here I am, ladies.
Now, I believe, Jenny, that there was a little Vicar of Dibley influence on your wedding day, wasn't there?
Well, I couldn't resist but have the classic "The Lord is my shepherd" intro as we were signing the register.
Oh.
And for not only people in my parish, but also my friends, they were like, in fact, one of my friends in the parish literally made a loud noise, was like, and was slapping her husband. And he was like, I know, I get it. And she was telling me afterwards, so funny. Yeah, it was such a joyful day, lots of happy memories, and so lovely to have our church family and our community there as well. We did a party in the hall afterwards, and yeah, one of the ladies from my church made the cake. Lots of them helped make sandwiches, and yeah, it was just a real day of joy. And obviously going away on holiday was lovely. But I'm very pleased to be back with you, lovely ladies.
Oh, we're glad you haven't abandoned us.
Oh, never. Oh, never. How could I?
Oh, wonderful. So we're back. We're all together. We now need to sort our recording. So we'll start off properly with something that we've loved this week. Jenny, I'm going to make you go first.
Awesome sauce. There's lots of things I've been loving this week. I think the one that comes to mind is, now I know we're going to come on to the theme of this week. We are in the season of Remembrance. And recently it's been the feast days of All Saints and All Souls. All Saints kind of commemorating those whose lives have witnessed to following Jesus in extraordinary ways, I suppose. The saints, and then All Souls, commemoration of the faithful departed, so thinking of people that have died. And so this is maybe a slightly bittersweet one, but something I've loved this week, because of it being All Saints and All Souls, is having some really kind of unexpectedly deep and beautiful conversations with parishioners who I see really often, but hardly ever get to talk about their loved ones who have died. So it may be husbands or daughters, sons, and just having not the excuse, but just sometimes for me, I need a little push before, asking and talking about things that are really sensitive and difficult. And just talking about All Souls has really opened up some beautiful conversations. So I think I've really loved that about this week.
That's a great answer. Oh, you always have such lovely answers for this, Jenny.
Oh, no. Once it was just riding a bike. I remember Caitlin bought something really powerful, and my thing I'd loved was I'd gone for a bike ride. So,
All good,
yeah.
all good. How about you, Kate?
What have I been liking this week? Very quick one is The X-Files. With it being spooky season, I decided I wanted to finally watch The X-Files. And I've been bothering Ruthie with my enjoyment of how incredibly 90s it is. But my real thing is I really controversially love the rain. Love the rain. When it's a rainy day, people say, oh, the weather's terrible. But it just makes me so happy. And it's been raining a lot, and I was able to take my dog on a really rainy walk, and I've been wearing my welly boots, and it's just been wonderful.
When you first said that, I thought you said Lorraine, and I did Lorraine Kelly, and you've been watching her TV. Kelly. I was like, she's got a lovely accent, and then realised you were saying the rain.
The rain.
The rain.
The rain.
Not
Love it.
Lorraine.
The rain.
The rain. Oh, wonderful.
What about you, Ruthie?
I have received a very lovely parcel today, completely out the blue, from one of my lovely friends called Katie, who is an absolute superstar and a babe. And she has sent me a little cross stitch. Can you see?
That's so
And
sweet.
to describe it to you guys, to you listeners, it says "safe space" in cross stitch, and it's in the colours of the Pride flag, and it's just beautiful. And on the other side, which I turned over and teared up, I don't know if you can see, but it says "for the safest space we know," and it's just been a little present for us. And I just looked at that and went, "Oh, that's
so
lovely." There's also chocolate in the box, so that's made me really happy.
Did you make it herself?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, so that's been a very lovely thing. I've been on my own quite a lot this week because Toby's gone off on retreat. And so it's just me and Team Nonsense, the son and the dog. So having a nice treat like that has been really lovely.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
I have to say, homemade or like handmade gifts are the best in the world. And one of the most beautiful gifts after the wedding was that Kate drew with her own hand a beautiful picture of me and Chris getting married, and like my face aghast with joy as we came out the church. And seeing your beautiful cross stitch just reminded me of that. I feel like we should share that for our listeners to see because it's so amazing. You're so talented. But yeah, creative people are just next level, I think. Being able to do something where you actually make something like that is, what a blessing.
What a blessing. Wonderful. So we've had lots of lovely things this week.
Yeah.
And then, Kate, you've done something a bit interesting this week, haven't you?
Yes, so I'm a vicar, and this week I convinced someone not to get baptised.
Unusual.
Explain.
People, flock to Twitter or whatever to say, these lefty liberal female clergy fighting against the kingdom of God. Right. So, for context, this Sunday I'm doing an infant baptism. And in order to be a godparent in the Church of England, you need to be baptised. Mm-hmm. So the parents had a friend who they wanted to be a godparent. And I said, well, if they're not baptised, they can be a supporting friend. They still have a similar role, they're just not a godparent.
Yeah.
And the parents went and talked to this person, and this prospective godparent said, you know what, I'll get baptised too, so I can be a godparent. And I said, okay, but I'm going to need to talk to this adult, because for me, the difference between an infant baptism, where it's about starting a faith journey and creating a context for that child to ask questions and develop in their faith, for me to baptise an adult, I really want to know that this is their decision and it's a faith decision, and they're really earnestly, they can make those promises and those declarations with full conscience. And so as I was talking to this person, they gave me a ring, and we decided that she really shouldn't just get baptised in order to be a godparent. She can still make all the promises, be involved with the service, and we don't even need to make a big deal out of her not being a godparent.
Yeah.
But, that's a much better situation than her being baptised when it's not really her decision, it's not really what she wants to do. So yeah, I convinced someone not to be baptised, and I'm not ashamed about it.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah.
What would you do, if you kind of had that situation?
Well, I had that situation, but it turned out a bit differently. So the baptism happened. Someone got baptised in order to become a godparent. So she was the week before and got baptised, and I did her baptism. I didn't know this kind of back history, and it was so that next month, not next week, she could be a godparent. But in that baptism service, something happened to her, and she was like, oh, there's something interesting there. And from that, she started coming to church more. So I don't know, I think there's something about it starting a faith journey, isn't it? And you need to move forward. But actually, if someone's going to just get baptised in order to be a godparent, but they're like, I don't believe in God and I think this is a load of nonsense, then I'd be like, maybe baptism isn't for you.
Yeah, and I think the clincher is whether or not you're going to be able to have an ongoing relationship with that person.
Yeah.
You know, if that person lived in my parish and I was able to, you know, check in with them and talk to them and continue that faith journey, it might be a bit different. But, you know, at least for me, the kind of baseline standard is that you're open to have a faith conversation with me. And it's not just going to be something that's kind of tagged on to another service.
Hey, you never know. Actually, by saying no or not yet, actually you might trigger something that gives the, you know, potential baptism candidate room for thought about, actually, well, what do I believe? Because I'm preparing an adult for baptism at the moment, and they have come up against the possibility to be baptised time and time again, and every time I've said no, or like, not yet, or it's not for me. And now they're coming forward going, this is the right time. This is what I'm ready to do. And so actually it's, you know, it's never a hard and fast rule as to whether you should say yes or no, just so someone can become a godparent. But it's brilliant. I think ministry is just having those conversations, isn't it? To either, to fuel the fire, I suppose, or help people to think about what it is they really want to do.
Yeah. And I do want to make it clear, like, just in case by some odd chance this person listens to a podcast, it wasn't like a conversation where we said, I don't believe in God, blah, blah, blah. But it was really clear that they felt it wasn't a right thing for them. You know, when I made it clear that this is an actual faith decision, you know, they kind of realised, actually, this is something I'd rather, if I was going to get baptised, I'd want to be properly taking it seriously.
Sure. Yeah. The promises are quite intense, aren't they? They're you've got to say them with meaning. You can't half-heartedly say, I submit to Christ and, you know, reject the devil and all rebellion. You've got to really go for it.
Yeah.
Well, and for an adult baptism, the declaration of faith is addressed to the candidate, whereas in an infant baptism, the whole community says the declaration of faith, the creed, as we call it in church language, together. So there's something about with infant baptism or child baptism that the whole community is holding the faith in order for this child to grow up in it. Whereas an adult baptism, it's very much more of a, do you believe this? Do you believe that God created the universe? Do you believe that God sent Jesus as his son? You know.
There we go. We've had a debate we didn't even expect to be having. But
a little baptism conversation.
So this week our episode is coming out on Remembrance Day, so the 11th of November, and as we were looking at the schedule trying to work out what to do, we thought it would be a good idea, as it comes out on this particular day, to talk a little bit about Remembrance Day, Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday and all the different things that comes with that. So to kick us off with that, Remembrance Day has really changed for me over the years significantly, because my dad became a chaplain quite a few years ago and served in the army for a while. And so we all thought, actually, we're not as knowledgeable at this topic as certain people are, so let's get some people who are actually knowledgeable about it. And so I had a little chat with my dad. Hello. Who are
Hello,
you?
I'm your dad. It's lovely to see lovely Ruthi on
a
be
screen
chatting
doing
to
the
you.
thing. Yeah, so for this particular podcast, as it's coming out on Remembrance Day, we thought it would be appropriate to talk to different people who have much better experience of military life and church life and things like that. So one of the people that we thought would be very good at this is a David Banbury. Could you just explain a bit why we might have picked you then?
Well, it's lovely being on this podcast. So I am a vicar. That's what I'm doing at the moment. A bit of vicaring up in the northwest. But I have served in the British Army for 12 years. And some of that was his reserve, Army Reserve, but also had spells of regular service. So there's quite a bit of green blood flowing through my veins.
It's camouflage blood.
Yeah.
And when you say you served in the army as a reserve and as a regular, what was your job? What were you doing?
Right. So I worked as a chaplain within the army. They're known as padres. And essentially, it is very similar to normal vicaring or being a Christian minister, but you do it within a military setting. You wear uniform, you hold a rank, and it's basically about being with people. As Ruthi knows, I say a lot about loving God and loving people and sticking the two together, and you just simply do it in an army or a military context. And for me, I've say with reserve forces, I've been attached to infantry regiment, which was a lot of running around with half a house on your back, it felt like, carrying a very, very, very heavy Bergen or rucksack. And then worked with medical units, worked with 3 different medical units, one based in Manchester, and then one that was based sort of Portsmouth way, and one that was based in Birmingham. But with the Portsmouth and the Birmingham one, I was actually based overseas, so Iraq and Afghanistan, working in a field hospital.
Yeah.
Long answer, Ruthie, but that's what I've done.
So that's, well, it's what we wanted to talk to you about, is your experience of being an army chaplain. And obviously it shaped a large amount of my teenage years and early 20s, you being overseas. Could you tell us just a little bit about, well, what was it like? How do you bring the two together?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason how I sort of came into military chaplaincy sort of basically was because I was working for a Christian charity and out of parish ministry, and I was really missing having a bunch of folk to look after and pray for. So I began to think about chaplaincy, and the deal was clinched by a Greater Manchester bus driving past me. Having asked God for a bit of guidance about if this was the right thing to do, this very orangey bus drove past me with "Join the Army" as a placard or as an advertising thing down the side. And I thought, well, that seems a pretty clear sign. So I joined the army in 2004, and I say I was attached to infantry battalion. Many of whom had actually served overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places like Bosnia and other places in the Balkans. And I thought, well, to do this authentically, what they've been willing to do, I've got to be willing to do. So when I was asked if I was willing to serve overseas, that's when I said, well, yeah, if you ask me, I'll do it. And that was when I went to Iraq in 2006. Yeah.
Goodness me. And so you said you served with medical groups. So what did a day-to-day job, was there such a thing of what it actually looked like day-to-day, or?
So on operations, which is kind of military speak for being overseas, normally in sandy places where people don't seem to like us very much, I was working in a field hospital, which is basically, if you imagine an NHS hospital with all the facilities of an NHS hospital, so wards, pharmacy, X-ray, surgical facilities, basically everything that's in an NHS hospital, but stick it in a desert and put it in tents, and that's what we were doing. Yeah. So I was chaplain there, and the job is kind of 2 things: looking after the staff in the hospital, because it can be an incredibly demanding job, and also, being there for the needs of the patients as well.
Yeah, goodness me. You have quite some amazing and really difficult and challenging stories as well from your time there, which we probably haven't got time for in all of this. I know what you're like, and you'll want to tell all of them. But it was such a fascinating experience, really difficult at times, of course, for both you overseas and for us who are back home. But just an amazing and brave thing to do, and I'm very proud of you for it. So
bless you. I know any soldier will be, pull up a sandbag and I'll tell you some war stories. But I think you wonder, you get that in Christian ministry. Are you a bit of an irrelevance? Are you sort of very much peripheral to people's lives? And I found military chaplaincy, folk were really glad to have you around. Now, a lot of the time, it was like parish ministry. You just bimble around, you chat with people, you form relationships, and it's sort of just doing life alongside people and with God. But there are times, just as in parish ministry, where tough stuff is happening and people are really glad that you're there because you're someone who they can talk to. You're outside the normal chain of command, and you're there as a pair of listening ears. And actually, I found how much people appreciated you offering to pray with them. That actually, we might think we live in a world where folk, aren't that interested in church or faith or Jesus, but actually they are. It's just quite, time's quite buried. So actually being a spiritual presence is, I think, really, really important.
Real fab. So this recording's coming out on Remembrance Day. How has Remembrance Day changed for you, or has it changed for you since serving in the military?
It has. I'm trying to avoid war stories, but I'll chuck one in. So when I was in Iraq, I took a Remembrance Sunday parade, and that was really moving to do it with the military in an operational environment with, significant hostile threats around us. And there was a bomb incident that left a number of soldiers killed and others really badly injured. And it was the poignancy, at Remembrance Sunday, you remember those who've given their lives, for freedom and in the serving our country. And there it was actually happening on the day. And, I have lost friends who've been killed in military service. And I've probably been alongside 40 plus people who've been killed and who I've been with in the hospital. And so you remember that service and sacrifice, not just in 2 world wars, but that actually have been subsequent. And it's not just those who die, but those who are injured and have life-changing injuries. And you realise that actually to serve in the military is to take on a great responsibility and a great privilege, and at times it has great costs attached to it. So Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day is always a very, very poignant day for me. It's a day where I want to wear my medals, and it's a day where I want to remember those who I've served alongside and remember those who've made the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, the day itself has really changed for me since you've been in the army, and it's a day I really wrestle with, actually. Sometimes I just find it a really difficult day, and other times I think, gosh, I can remember the stories of people that you've talked about, and it hits home a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, the bit I'd say with that is that, in no way do I want to glorify war or conflict. It is
of course.
It is a dreadful thing. And, seeing people killed and seeing, life-changing injuries. And the purpose of the military is there to actually maintain peace. And actually, if war or conflict breaks out, actually, in a way, there has been a failure somewhere. So, and when peace is no longer sustainable or conflict breaks out, we rely on the military to try and re-establish peace. And that was one of the first lessons I learned, that the role of the army is to re-establish peace as quickly as possible. So ultimately, it sounds strange when it's about weaponry and the application of lethal force, but actually its job is to either sustain peace or re-establish peace. So it's not about glorifying war, it's remembering people who are working for peace and trying to establish it or sustain it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So-
I got a bit preachy, Ruthi.
No.
I got a bit preachy.
So segueing on from that in a way that's difficult to do, because we talked about something quite serious, and I'm now going to look at something quite silly, I think. Obviously, we are a podcast that mainly talks about telly and film.
Fantastic. I have no problem with that.
And so I wondered if there were any examples of military chaplains in TV or film that you could think of that either get it or don't get it, or different examples of telly that talks about this kind of job that you did.
Yeah, it's a great question. Normally with chaplains, what happens is they get a tiny cameo role in either TV series or in films, and it's normally them tending to those who have been fatally wounded, and it's good to represent that. It's a long way back, but actually there was a TV series about an army military hospital called MASH, where the chaplain did appear and was quite well represented. And I say there are other films that have portrayed chaplains, but I say it's often not a mainstream role or character.
No,
I think the only
one of the films that you suggested I watch was The Longest Day. Goodness me, that was 3 hours of my life I'm never getting back. And the chaplains appeared on TV for like less than 5 minutes.
You Philistine. It's a marvellous film. But if you look at it telly, I mean, there was a series about army bomb disposal teams. It was allegedly, it was set in Afghanistan, although actually I think it was filmed in South Africa.
Oh.
But that featured a chaplain quite prominently. It was very positive in as much as it featured a female chaplain. I thought it was an honest portrayal of some of the worker chaplains, but she ended up having a fairly intense sexual relationship with one of the other characters, which I felt went quite some distance away from the brief of a chaplain. By and large, dropping your trousers and having sex with someone is that's not written in the role description.
And this was Bluestone 42, wasn't it?
Yeah, Bluestone 42, yeah.
I remember watching that and feeling like I had a tiny insight as to what you were doing. Well, hopefully not all of it, although...
No. Mainly focused on the sweeties and the banter.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was, I thought, as a modern-day representation of military life, it was very good. And obviously, more recently, there's been series like Our Girl, which, tried to portray, and that was medics in conflict settings. But again, padres or chaplains didn't get much of a look in. And the trouble is when you know stuff, you spot the inaccuracies in any bit of TV. I mean, you lovely people have done it with the Vicar of Dibley. That had never happened.
Yeah. Kate doing her job of making sure that we all know that the hymn numbers are wrong and they've got the order wrong. And it's the difficult thing, isn't it? Watching anything on telly when you've got a bit of knowledge about it, you just go, that would never, ever happen.
Yeah.
But going on to the Vicar of Dibley then, obviously we mainly talk about the Vicar of Dibley a lot of the time. And do you like the Vicar of Dibley?
I'm a big fan, and certainly my memories of a few years ago were sitting and watching it with you, Ruthi, and it was it's a really charming series, and I think Geraldine is a beautiful character with a heart full of love and a serious addiction to chocolate.
Yes. Do you have a favourite moment or a favourite character or anything like that from the series that you can think of?
I mean, I think, goodness me, I've forgotten her name temporarily. The Verger, Alice's wedding. I know you've covered that recently.
Yeah.
That was utterly glorious. And And I think the two of the bits are where she's wondering if there is a relationship about to happen that doesn't happen. And then the bit where actually the relationship does happen, and they were very, very charming.
Yeah.
And I also quite liked it when her media career began to take off, which was most amusing, albeit short-lived, and
Yes.
with some negative effects.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for agreeing to chat to me, Dad, about all this different thing. It's nice to have more expert opinions on this, to talk about it on Remembrance Day, which is obviously such an important day for you. And yeah, I'm every Remembrance Day now, I'm very grateful for what you've done. And yeah, having a military dad is something I never thought I would have, but it is something I'm immensely proud of you for. So I think we'll put that online and let everyone know that, hey, Dad, you're pretty great.
Well, Ruthi, you're pretty great too.
Oh, bless you. Thanks for joining. So that was a conversation with my dad, which was really, really lovely to have. But I'm not the only one who has a little bit of a connection with military. Am I, Kate?
No, so like you, Ruthie, I've gone on a bit of a journey with how I relate to Remembrance Sunday, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later. But for me, one of the key factors in that journey and realisation was connecting with my family history and how they things they were doing during World War II, but also on my mum's side there's been a lot of military personnel, lots of military involvement. My mum's dad was actually an RAF chaplain during World War II. My mum's mum was in the Wrens, which was the female arm of the RAF during the war. And my dad's dad was in Dad's Army, as we call it, the Home Guard.
Not the TV show.
Not the TV show, because he had sight problems, so he didn't qualify for active service. So, so he was on the kind of home front, as it were, during the war. And for me, connecting with that history has really helped humanise the conflict, humanise the people involved, and help me feel a connection to these services, which I think before felt very disconnected for me.
Yeah, so actually let's talk about that for a bit now, because we'll talk in a moment about what we actually do on Remembrance Day, but as we're chatting about it, how do we find Remembrance Day? Because it's something that I've really wrestled with over the years and have changed opinions about. So I would be someone who would want to avoid war at all cost and don't think war is the way forward, but actually see that sometimes actually if there's an oppressor and a bully, someone needs to stand up to them. And so my kind of understanding of this has been really, really changed and challenged over the years. And I think I was probably, I'm going to say anti-Remembrance Day, because I think it kind of became a bit, I think it has become a bit culty for some people, and actually it's really obsessive, and people use it to talk about the far right, and actually, those who were fighting on for World War I and World War II were against the far right and were fighting against it, but it can become a bit of a, we're English now, boys who are fighting in camo and and all that kind of stuff can get wrapped into it, and I'm very, very against that. And I don't like that at all, and I don't like it when it glorifies war and it's, we're going off to fight these people and and the racism that can come out from it. I really hate that. But having my dad go out and serve and be a chaplain, and I didn't realise quite how many people he'd seen die out there. Actually, it brought it home to me in a new and different way, and I knew the people that he talked about, and suddenly they were gone and had died in conflict. And so Remembrance Day for me is much more about, yes, remembering those who served in the Great War and World War II, but also those since then who are in conflict and fighting in conflict. And I suspect this Remembrance Sunday I'll be thinking quite a lot about the Ukraine actually, and Russia and that conflict at the moment. But what about you guys? What's your relationship with Remembrance Sunday?
Well, unlike both of you, I don't actually have any connections to the army, military at all. So in my kind of growing up years, the only connection with war that I remember was going down to London to protest against the Iraq War. And my mum was quite fiercely pacifist, so we all were wearing white poppies. I remember in year 9 or year 10, like we had to write a speech as part of our like English learning. Had to be like a 5-minute speech on something we felt passionate about. And I wrote like why war is always wrong. And so being a pacifist and wearing a white poppy was something that I always grew up with, like just absolutely hated war, just desperately believed it shouldn't exist, and also that we didn't need it. And so I think it was only when I got to college, I remember even at university, like sitting up till 3 o'clock in the morning, talking, debating, like, with these issues with my Christian friends who I just drove up the wall. I remember one of my friends just going to bed in frustration, just being like, because I think sometimes I know I have the habit to do loads of talking and passionate, emotive evangelizing of my belief and little of the listening in return and like graciously hearing. I'm sure that's, definitely been a part of my way in the past. So when I came to college, that was the first time I actually seriously engaged with Remembrance Sunday, the red poppy, what it means for people. And I think actually it is through, ordained ministry, or I guess through church leadership. Obviously it doesn't have to be ordained. So that's where I've learned kind of the significance, and that's where I've learned the power and the importance of Remembrance Day. And I loved how your dad said about actually the focus of it is striving for peace. It's all about peace. It's all about peace. And I, coming from a pacifist household, was very nervous about having to wear a red poppy because I felt I was betraying my kind of history and almost family history. But actually I found it to be not a sacrificing of those beliefs, but an even greater demonstration of why peace is required, I suppose.
So, for context, the red poppy is sold by the Royal British Legion. It's sold to raise funds for their work, which is for supporting ex-service people after conflict. And I think they also support service people during conflict as well. Yeah. The white poppy is produced by the Peace Pledge Union, and it's a symbol of pacifism and a commitment to peace. There are other poppies round that get circulated. I think there's a purple one for all animals which have died in conflict. Yeah. And there is a green one, I think, for the environmental consequences of conflict. I thought I would just add that context for those of you who may not be aware. For me, I've gone through a journey, I think, fairly similar to Ruthi, and a bit like you, Jenny, as well. I would consider myself a pacifist. I always felt extremely uncomfortable at Remembrance Day services. My first memory where I remember feeling so uncomfortable was during secondary school and us going to a parade and 2 minutes silence at a cenotaph. These are big memorials, often in cities and towns, in commemoration of all who died during World War I and World War II. And I remember watching one of the army cadets, so that's kind of the youth branches of the military, faint and be kind of carried away, and then someone stand up in their place. And I just remember thinking, this makes me feel uncomfortable. Yeah. That, like, there was just something about it. And then I remember when we were studying at Durham at Theological College, there was this huge, huge service at the cathedral, at Durham Cathedral, and it made me so uncomfortable, just a huge pageantry and a sense of, I think there was at least about 5-10 years ago, there was a sense that people were really being bullied into wearing poppies on TV. You'd get, TV presenters called out for not wearing a poppy soon enough in November. And that always made me feel really uncomfortable. So I made a choice in my 20s to start wearing a white poppy as a symbol of my commitment to peace. But then when I started active ministry, when I actually started meeting the people kind of for whom Remembrance Day really is important, meeting people who had family in active service, meeting people who had lost friends and family in World War I, World War II, in other conflicts, realising that by not wearing a red poppy, although I saw that as just a statement about I'm looking towards a future and peace, for them it was a dishonouring of people who've lost their lives and making sacrifices for freedoms that I enjoy, to be able to say I stand for peace. So I started wearing both entwined, and that's my practice now, to show that I honour and respect all the people who make the sacrifice to serve in armed conflict, to serve our freedoms in order to work for peace, for all those lives which have been lost, for which I see as tragedy that's had to happen. But I wear the white poppy as a symbol of my hope for the future, the Christian hope that there will be a time where there will be no more war, there will be no more conflict, and there will be peace. And I, for me, it's incompatible with Christianity to not see that as possible. I believe that we can make peace on earth, and it may take a long time, but by the grace of God, by the glory of Christ, it can happen. So that's Remembrance Sunday for me. And now I work and live in a very military dominated area. There's quite a few bases around.
I was going to ask that for us who has worked because I've worked in a parish with an army barracks, and it does change Remembrance Sunday, doesn't it?
So many people in my parishes are ex-forces. Remembrance Sunday is so important. The plans this year are, after our Remembrance Sunday service, we're going to the pub, because that's where the ex-service people are going to gather. We're going to spend time with them. So, one of my colleagues is an SAS chaplain as well, who I work, quite closely with. She's actually in my group. So it's actually really important to me now, which, if you said that to me 10 years ago. It's a really funny day. I remember kind of doing the services for the first time as a curate, and having this wrestle within myself. My first Remembrance Sunday was in a kind of vicar role, was in a parish where there was an army barracks, and so it was a big thing, and there were lots of the military personnel from there who come to it, and it was like a military operation, planning the timing, trying to nail it that you hit 11 o'clock exactly, and the bell ring, and you do your last post and all that kind of thing, and cutting down the sermon quickly so you've got the time right, and all that kind of stuff. Doing that was really, really difficult and felt very formal and restricted in lots of ways. And then I did it again in curacy at a different church that I'd moved on to, where there were people in the congregation who had a military background, and there was someone who came every year from a military background because it was so important. And we went out to the kind of war memorial that we had outside the church to do that, and it felt a bit more relaxed. And it was my first time I preached for the first time on Remembrance Sunday, and talked about my wrestle with it, and talked about my experience with my dad now, and loads of people came up. This sounds like I'm bragging, but loads of people came up and said how moved they were by it, that I was honest and talked about that. But on a slightly different note, the 2-minute silence, I had to poke a young person who started flossing halfway through
Oh no! What, flossing is in the dance move?
As in the dance move, as opposed to hygiene, dental hygiene. Stop! This is not the
gotta be still. Can I just add in quickly, Kate, when you were talking about your experience in school, you suddenly jogged my memory back to being in primary school, going to the war memorial. I believe this is in Polbrook. for any Northamptonshire folk out there, and hating, obviously, forgive me because I didn't understand what was going on properly, hating the 2-minute silence because I could not be silent for 2 minutes, and I just laughed and got the giggles so easily. And for me, having to be silent for 2 minutes as a tiny human or like a small child was absolute torture. And I remember like going, no, like so trying to hold it in, like desperately trying to like squeeze my hands tightly together, shut out any of my friends who were like nudging or wobbling with laughter, and just be like, no, because I just couldn't bear to be the one that goes, you know, in the silent crowd, which I hate. So that's probably my first memory. I'd forgotten that. Ugh. I love silence now. Isn't it funny how we grow up and change?
So it might be worth just saying what the kind of basic structure of a Remembrance Day is. Yeah. I think we've kind of thrown some stuff around, but maybe just making it really clear. Remembrance Day is the 11th of November, and at 11 o'clock, a 2-minute silence is observed in order to remember all the lives that have been lost in a pursuit of peace. Yeah, I would say. Bit more complex than that, but really that's what you're looking at. Remembrance Sunday is the Sunday closest to that day. So the 11th of November, there may well be something, a service or a civil ceremony in the town, in the village, in the city. Remembrance Sunday is based usually in the church or starts somewhere like a war memorial and then comes to the church, or sometimes it's based at a war memorial, but it is a service. It usually includes a short talk of some kind, a reading of some forms of war poetry. There is a particular sentence or paragraph that is always read.
The Kahima.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a 2-minute silence, which is preceded by the words, "We will remember them." Then we have the last post, often played on a trumpet. 2-minute silence, and then the reveal. Reveal?
I think it's Reveille.
Which is also something else played on the trumpet. And then at that point, the services will then kind of divert. But the aim is to always have 2 minutes at 11 o'clock. Yeah, the 2-minute silence, I think, is the key thing. And it's also the most difficult if you're unfamiliar with it. I think especially for young people, because who are you remembering and what are you remembering? Often when you're young, unless you have actual direct family members and friends connection to the military, I think it's so abstract, it's so difficult. And the 2-minute silence became more poignant for me when I started actually thinking about friends, family, people I've met who have connections to the armed forces. But also I always throw in a prayer for peace as well.
Amen. Yeah. So that's a little bit about what the service kind of looks like and what we do with it, and our own personal wrestles with it, and knowing how important a day it is for so many people, and how to honour that and keep your own convictions as well is something that we wrestle with and struggle. But as I said earlier, we are a podcast that talks about telly, and we're adding a bit more films into this as well. And so we wanted to talk a bit about some of the army chaplains, and then some of the TV that we just kind of associate with this remembrance period of time. So I think none of us particularly watch army telly, do we? And so don't know a lot about this one. I do remember watching Bluestone 42.
Yeah, I do.
Which gave a bit of an insight to me as to what my dad's role would have looked like in when he was posted in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not the having sex with the captain. That didn't happen. But actually, there were a few like little jokes in there that I thought, oh, I know about that. So the chaplain always has sweeties on them, which is something that my dad always did have and got well on operations. So there's her. There's also the TV series MASH, which I watched a few kind of the key moments in that. I think Father O'Keefe, I think his name is, so MASH is set in the Vietnam War, and he is a Catholic chaplain, and there are some really beautiful, vulnerable moments with him where he talks about his failings and where he's gone wrong. It was a comedy series, but there are these really poignant moments as part of it, and saw a scene where he helps to calm someone down who's just gone a bit mad with war. So he was someone I knew about. And then for this podcast, I watched The Longest Day, which was a very long film, but there were things that I wanted to talk about in it and reflect with you guys. Is that there are 2 incidences with army chaplains in it, and in quite a serious war film, they're both played for laughs, and it is things that happen. So one of the scenes, one of the army chaplains parachutes in and drops his communion set that's in like a briefcase in a river, and so the entire scene is him diving in the river, and this other bloke's like, come on Padre, we've got to go, you could just leave the communion set, and he's like, no, I can't do it, and keeps diving in the water trying to find this blooming communion set. Which I think points a bit at what the role of chaplain seems to be in TV, is that they're often a point of comedy and a bit of light relief in that. Sometimes they do the poignant stuff, but the memories that I have, they're most often played for laughs. Would you say that?
Yeah, or they are some sort of villainous conflict character.
Ooh.
I draw less on kind of the military TV because I watch less of it, and more kind of murder mystery stuff, where the vicar is either comedic relief or they're the murderer.
Yeah, that's true.
I do wonder, however, in terms of the vicar or personal faith being the comedic relief, I remember we had a tutor at Cranmer Hall who had been a chaplain for the armed forces, and he said that chaplains are one of the few people who can mix across the different ranks.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you build relationships across that, and I think because of that you can get more real with people, but you can also, I suppose, be that point of contact for kind of be the light-hearted relief for people as well. And I wonder if there's something there which this points to.
So that's how I kind of saw the religious figures in most of these TV series. Apart from, in The Longest Day, there's a scene with some nuns. And this bit was wonderful. We searched it afterwards to see if it actually happened, and we're not sure it did. But there's a scene where the French forces are fighting against the German, and there's this big battle going on, and the French are getting their butts kicked. And through the middle of this battle, an army of nuns walks through. There's about 10 of them, all holding briefcases, walking through the centre of this battle with like shots going everywhere. And they walk towards the French soldiers, and the French soldiers are like, sisters, get out of the way, what on earth are you doing? And they come in and they're like, we're trained nurses, let us do our job. And they're like, no, sisters, go hide, go find safety. And they're like, we're trained nurses, let us do our job. And the Mother Superior like organises everyone, and they just go straight off to tend to the wounded. And I thought that was one of the most powerful bits of that whole film, was just seeing these women being so brave, walking through and just going, no, this is our role in this particular conflict.
I think that is amazing and powerful, and I think this underlines why I don't tend to watch a lot of war kind of TV because I find it so moving and also so difficult. Even when you're describing that instance, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can feel my eyes welling up.
Oh,
and it's not that I don't want to avoid it and just stick my head in the sand, but I think actually it's so helpful, and I haven't done it for a long time. And Remembrance Day, you know, you tend to find there are films on or some historical programmes about facts. I think last year or the year before there was a wonderful documentary where black and white videos were brought to colour, and there was like an hour-long or 2-hour-long episode of like the footage that in colour. It's incredible. And I think it's so helpful, whether it's fiction or, you know, documentaries, because for me, who is so far away from war, even though obviously war is ongoing in our world right now, it brings home like the reality of it. And it's horrifying because it is undoubtedly the most brave, sacrificial, just incredible thing that someone could choose to do with their life, to be like on the front lines or, you know, serving in any kind of military capacity, whether it's medical, you know, flying technician, engineer, chef, chaplain, you know, whatever you're doing. And yet at the same time, I don't want it for anyone.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so awful that I can't bear that anyone would be in that situation. And for those nuns, I can imagine they just felt so strongly it would have been God's calling for them to be alongside and to tend those that are wounded. And you just think that, again, that's the most brave thing to do, to walk onto that field. And yet I'm just like, that feeling of wanting to protect them, or, you know, for them to not be in that situation, with them not to see what's going on in that situation as well. It's such a huge contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things we don't really see much necessarily in kind of war movies, war TV, the kind of people outside of those in active conflict and how it affects them. So I mean, a really practical example is right now there is a war in Ukraine, and we are seeing it in our homes as we struggle to heat our homes, because the direct consequence of that war for us is supply lines have been interrupted. And so that affects our food, but it also affects our fuel. So there's no one who's not affected by that war. But then as we remember things like World War II, we very rarely think about, as we've got the nuns in The Longest Day, so I don't know which conflict Longest Day is set in.
Oh, it's World War II. It's all about D-Day. Yeah.
But then we don't really hear about conscientious objectors. I mean, we do have like Allo Allo, which looks at the French resistance as a comedy series. But it's, you know, it's very much played for laughs. And yeah, I think it's important when we come to Remembrance Day to think about everyone else as well, and the families at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
There was a brilliant film. Well, I've heard it's brilliant because I've not actually watched it, which focuses on a conscientious objector. It's called Hacksaw Ridge, and it was a guy who, because of his Christian faith, didn't feel that he could carry a weapon, so he runs in and out to go and save people and carry them back, and that was his job instead of
Wow. Oh, that's again. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I do need to do some watching, really.
Well, yeah. So there's there aren't loads of examples of chaplains, but there's other bits of TV that we kind of associate with Remembrance, and Kate has one in particular.
So every November, I try to watch the last season of Blackadder. Blackadder Goes Forth, which is set during World War One, particularly at the Somme, and it's a small troupe of military personnel, led by Blackadder, and it deals with different social classes, etc., etc. However, particularly the last scene of the last episode is, I think, one of the most emotive and poignant pieces of Remembrance TV that is out there. And I think because it's a comedy show and the contrast is so great, and also apparently it was quite accidental as well, which we'll get to. So the final episode, they get told that they need to go over the top, so they need to go from their trenches and push forward, and they know that this will likely result in their death. So there's a whole struggle of Blackadder trying to get sent away from the front line, claiming to
Claims
have
madness,
medical
doesn't
reasons,
he?
etc., etc. Right at the end, they realise there is no turning back. They have to do this, and there is really kind of emphasising the injustice of particularly that conflict, where there was a needless loss of life.
Yeah.
Because not much ground was gained in these pushes forward. And they go over the top, and you see them running, and it goes into slow motion, and then it moves to still as they hit a landmine, and then it fades to a field of poppies and birdsong, and even just describing it, I'm getting tingles and I'm welling up. Because it's beautiful. It was accidental because apparently they never meant to make it slow motion. It just looked really, really bad in full speed.
Oh, interesting.
Slow motion. And for me, it's a great emphasis of why we wear poppies.
Yeah.
Because of these poppies that grew on the fields of the Somme.
Yeah.
Symbols of new life, but also the blood that was shed. But it just captures that moment and that emotion for me, which gets me into the Remembrance Sunday mindset.
Yeah. It's a really beautiful scene. I think I watched that. I did World War One and World War Two poetry in English literature, I think, for A level. I think we watched that episode of Blackadder as part of it. There you go. Yeah. So there's a few TV shows that we can think of that don't, target chaplains specifically, but have that. And so one of them is Dad's Army, that Kate's grandparent was in, and that's
not the TV show,
not the TV show,
the real Dad's Army,
the real Dad's
which
Army,
was a nickname for the home
guard.
Front.
That's something I just associate with my granddad because he watched it so much and loved it, and don't tell him Pike and all that kind of stuff is just stuck in my head. And there's the more recent TV show about called Our Girl, which again I haven't watched but have heard lots of people talking about, and my dad's found it really significant about a woman who is in the army. So there's lots of these kind of things, but it's not what we naturally gravitate to. What we naturally gravitate to is Vicar of Dibley. Yeah. And so, Kate, you have another episode to pitch to us.
I do. So there isn't a Vicar of Dibley Remembrance Sunday episode, but I took up the challenge to pitch, if there were an episode, what would it be like? And we're going to work with that pitch. I really enjoy doing this. Firstly, I've technically got two pitches. The first is incredibly short, and this would be a comic relief style, like really short minisode.
Yeah. Great word. Minisode.
Exactly. And it would be probably from around season 1, I'm thinking, is the setting.
Yeah.
So we've got Mrs. Cropley still around.
Great.
And it would be a flashback episode where the Vicar of Dibley cast are parodying Dad's Army, and they're sort of portraying who their, I suppose, parents would have been in, or their equivalent roles would have been in a sort of Dad's Army Dibley. Right?
Nice.
Yeah. That's just a concept. Yeah.
That's not
Pitch
the main
1.
focus.
Okay, that sounds...
Pitch 2. We're going to do this. I've split it into sort of 4 sections, not necessarily 6, but so that we can sort of riff on it. The setting is, I think, around season 3. So we're capturing, and this will be important later, but we're capturing the relationship, maybe it's more season 2. It's the relationship between David and Jerry, which isn't antagonistic.
Yeah.
But still isn't chummy.
Okay.
It's Jerry is conscious of her singleness.
Okay.
But this isn't should we have women vicars setting. Okay. So our opening scene, as ever, is going to be the parish council. and they're
Classic.
discussing plans for a Remembrance Day parade and service. David Horton makes a snide comment to Geraldine about being a lefty liberal priest,
Yeah.
and sternly warns her not to spout any socialist claptrap from the pulpit and ruin Remembrance Sunday.
Yeah.
I feel like that's very on brand with David Horton.
Yeah.
David is really keen that this is all pomp and circumstance, and he's talking about all the local dignitaries that could be invited. Geraldine says, okay, I'm going to take your challenge, because yes, I am a pacifist, but I'm going to take your challenge, and I'm going to, I want this to be a really good service, but I actually want us to really focus on the Royal British Legion and supporting people and raising money for the Legion and having some actual armed forces involved. And I'm going to challenge you to actually talk to and visit the ex-service people who are in the village and invite them to be involved.
Oh, okay.
So we're setting up two storylines here.
Mm.
What would you add then to that parish council scene? Have I got a right kind of setup?
Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe you'll get onto this. Doesn't Frank talk about the war years at some point and about him as a farmhand or something like that? I have a vague
He speaks about a
memory
young
of that.
farmhand named Justin, but I think that it was that he was he admired him deeply.
Yeah, because Mrs. Cropley's gone by this time, but you'd hear her talking about stories of being a land girl and stuff like that, and Owen's parents would have been farmers, and you'd have all their conversations coming in about that, about providing for the war effort, and there'd be something ridiculous that one of them had done in a blackout or
Oh yeah,
over,
that's
wouldn't
true.
there?
Yeah.
That would be part of it.
Yeah, so I think maybe Hugo would be wearing what's his face's scarf from Dad's army, just as a slight nod. A
Oh,
knitted scarf.
nice. Yeah.
But I really want the kind of key tension for Geraldine is she's a pacifist,
Yeah.
and she's kind of just having to face Remembrance Sunday head on.
Yeah.
A key tension for David Horton is he wants this to be a great kind of production,
Yeah.
but he needs to face the kind of real stories and real people. And it's
Okay.
not going to be a perfect service like he wants.
Cool. Right. Next part.
Next part. Scene 2, we're going to be in the vicarage. And I think there's opportunities here for back and forth with Alice, maybe Hugo, a few other people. But really this is a setup because Geraldine is going to phone or be phoned by the local base chaplain and is going to arrange to go to the base. For kind of work experience, kind of.
I'm guessing
thing.
a plot here.
I left that part fairly sparse actually, because for me it's just a setup for the next bit. I don't know if you think there's any bits we could add in.
Oh no, carry on. I'm
Okay.
wondering what's going to happen when she visits.
Yeah, so the next section is going to be a sort of a dual montage kind of bit. So focusing on Geraldine first. Geraldine is essentially going to be doing boot camp. She's swooning over the soldiers.
Yeah.
Getting her flirt on. She's enjoying being bossed around and bossing around as well. I think Dawn French would do some fantastic scenes, and I'm sure she's done them kind of in an oversized military uniform with a hat that kind of goes too low on her head.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sure I've seen it, and if I haven't, it's so clear in my head. I do that. And maybe taking some other members of the parish council for a kind of team building boot camp experience.
I like the obstacle course idea. That could be very funny.
Yeah.
And like little ways to cheat round the obstacles.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you can just sort of,
Yeah.
it's there in the head, right?
Yeah.
You've got Geraldine marching about.
The
and-
big net that you're supposed to climb over, she kind of starts to jump and then just walks around it.
Yeah,
That kind of thing,
yeah.
Or the one you're
I've done
supposed
that
to,
myself.
crawl under.
Yeah.
She gives it a couple of seconds and then just walks over the top.
Or just goes like uses swim arms to make her way over around it or something.
And I can definitely see her flirting with officers in the mess and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's great.
But is she going to stumble upon something that gives her food for thought?
Ooh. Yeah. So what would it be, Jenny?
I don't know. I sort of just had this imagination when she's tumbling around the base doing hilarious things, having a few flirts. She walks into a room of like, I don't know, or the chapel or a place of remembrance where there are photos or like visible reminders of people that have lost their lives. That's what came to my mind. But
yeah.
Oh, really? Is that what you had in mind as well?
Well, no, no, yeah.
Oh, right.
No, I think that's. I didn't really think that far, but yeah, I think that's exactly. She needs to have that moment of
being confronted. Yeah.
And maybe kind of seeing how the RBL, because I imagine this is like a fundraising for RBL, Royal British Legion. So I imagine there's a kind of evidence of how that money's being used, you know, for the active services as well.
Yeah.
So then while she's doing that, I think David is visiting ex-service people in the village. And this is an opportunity for cameos from Dad's Army actors.
It's a good idea.
Kind of little nods. And I think he's going to be confronted by the real stories and the legitimate need for post-service support.
Yeah.
And how this isn't just supposed to be, you know, an opportunity to show off that he's the local councillor and he's got his, you know, the mayor has his chains on.
Yeah.
And you know, all of that. But actually there's a human need here. He's, at this point, if it's season 2, season 3, he's softened enough to be able to take that human interest.
Yeah.
So it's not like on the campaign trail when it went one in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
But he's actually taking in and being challenged by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So he'd like talk to someone who, you know, lost a limb or lost their hearing or someone who wasn't getting their war pension and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Wasn't able to find employment, so is living in, you know, he thinks of this as one of like squalor houses we need to get rid of. And maybe that's something which is brought up in the opening parish council meeting about these problem areas of the village.
Yeah.
And he's realising actually there's a reason it's like this. It's not like it's a choice.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a kind of middle part.
Yeah.
And we get to the close. So the close is going to be the Remembrance Day service, in which we see kind of the people that Geraldine's met at the base. We see the people that David Horton has met, all coming together to put together a service, doing readings, standing in the congregation, either at War Memorial or in the church. And Geraldine is going to give a stonker of a sermon.
Yeah.
Something along the lines of where she says, I know I wouldn't be able to go into combat, partly because of my love of chocolate.
Oh, yeah.
But also because I don't think anyone would actually want that from me as their vicar. You don't want, I don't think you want a vicar who is hungry to go into combat. However, that just means that I have even more respect for those who do make that sacrifice of their lives, minds, well-being and families to protect our freedoms and to serve the peace. I couldn't do it, and I pray for a time when no one has to, but in the meantime, we celebrate and honour those who do.
Ooh, nice.
I can see it.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, feels true to how the character of Geraldine would address that. I like that. I think that sermon, it feels like an appropriate response from the BBC as well. Do you know what I mean? To look forward with hope, but to, like you say, celebrate, honour, and thank those who have given their life or who do willingly go into service. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we'd had David Horton standing alongside for like the poorest person in a village, one of those people he's visited, and standing in the middle of them. Maybe
Yeah.
he's the one shaking the Royal British Legion bucket.
Yeah.
And writing a big cheque to go into it. But then also, because this is something that's happened in real life for me, I think there should be a 2-minute silence, or at least a short silence. And during which, and as I said, this happened in real life for me last year, a robin comes in and sits in the church during the silence and participates in the silence. Because that for me last year was like, this is a TV moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I share another potential TV moment? But it would be the comedy version of the 2-minute silence. So this had happened in my parish the year before I arrived. Don't ask me how it happened. I actually don't know. But after the first part of the last post is played, 2-minute silence begins. When the silence ends, that's when the Reveille is played. And instead of that being played on a CD player, the song that was played was, "Here comes the girls, girls, girls." So, and honestly, I was when my local RBL chairperson was telling me about it, I was like, because I wouldn't have recovered from that. So I wonder if a situation like that would be pure Vicar of Dibley gold. I mean, it actually was real life in my parish. Here come the girls.
Oh my goodness me.
Yeah, unbearable, really. But I wonder if something like that could work. I mean, but then people might find that offensive because it's meant to be such an important, solemn occasion, but it did happen in real life.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe when they're practicing for...
Oh, that's a good idea.
Great
Yeah,
idea.
Jim's got his CD player and he's mashed the button wrong or something.
Messed it up.
I just, yeah.
What's the name of the choir master? I feel like he could bring out some modern
Gareth, is it? Is it Gareth?
No, it's...
No. Cecil.
Oh, Cecil, yeah, sorry.
Cecil.
Cecil would bring out...
Oh, you thinking Gareth Malone?
Yes. I definitely am. I was going to say Gareth Mahoney.
Yeah, but no, Cecil would... I think it may be like we're expecting it to be something really comical, but actually it's something really beautiful.
Yeah.
I can hear that.
Well, frankly, I love that episode.
Yeah.
Caitlin, write it into the BBC. Let's get Dawn French back on our tellies, recreating a new series. But yeah, I love that. I think it's excellent.
I would like to just add one thing into it, that she goes and meets the chaplain, and he's a very sexy man. And he's like, oh, why don't you come and see a bit about what the boys are doing? 'Cause they would have said it like that, although there would have been potentially women serving. And she's all flirty and like, oh, yes, of course. And that's how she ends up doing the assault course.
Yeah, so maybe
I like that.
Instead of it being a vicarage scene where she just gets a phone call, it's some sort of clergy study day or mixer or something, and she goes up to him and she's enjoying like his uniform.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Getting her flirt on a bit. And then he's like, oh, do you want to come and see? And she's like, oh, yes, I'd like to come and see.
Yeah.
I love that.
She'd have some brilliant innuendo about it. It'd be great. But
it's very much billed as for people who are interested in being army chaplains. But she's really doing it because she wants to check out the men.
The men in
uniform.
know that. Or ladies in uniform now. Very much.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Oh, we've covered so much good stuff in this episode, and obviously today is such an important day for so many people. This coming Sunday is an important day for so many people, and if you were like one of us as well, and Remembrance Day isn't something that you've come up against much, or you've never really been to church on Remembrance Day, then why not give it a go this year and just engage with what's going on in your local community, see if your local church is doing something, and just make the time to, recommit yourself to the ways of peace. Sometimes it seems that there is so much going on in our world and we have no idea how to make it more of a peaceful thing. But our God is one who takes the tiniest of acts of faith, acts of peace, acts of justice, and turns them into a multitude of blessing. So we hope that our wrestling through our memories and our sharing about remembrance has been helpful for you. And we wondered if we would finish this episode with a prayer. And this is a prayer that we'll be praying in many communities this coming Sunday as well. It says this: "We worship God, who is good and just and true. He created and sustains the world and loves us, though we have failed him. We remember all who have given their lives in the struggle for justice and peace, all who suffer in war and conflict, and all who live in terror. We ask for God's guidance and blessing, that we may do his will, and that all peoples may come to acknowledge his kingship and his reign. Amen."
Amen.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Toby for editing our ramblings.
Any views expressed in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily represent those of the Church of England or any other organisations with which we are affiliated.
And as always, bless you for listening. What do you call a military officer who goes to the bathroom a lot?
Don't know.
Oh.
A lieutenant.
That's terrible, but great.